Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel, and we've got a lot going on tonight in the Minnesota Vikings world. We've got a Daniel Jeremiah mock draft to look at. I did my own draft simulation. Also, after the other night, we made a list of quarterbacks for the Vikings if they're looking for a starting quarterback. I was inspired to make a list if they're looking for just competition for JJ McCarthy. So I've got 10 quarterbacks there of 1 through 10 who I would like to see the most if they had a quarterback competition with JJ McCarthy to, we'll call it the least. I mean, the list would be, nobody, but the 10 guys that are at least mildly realistic and could be quarterback competition if they still have belief in JJ McCarthy. So I've got that, along with a Kyler Murray update from Adam Schefter and much more. So how about we dive right in to Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock draft. And I just want to say first that Daniel Jeremiah, to me, always at the top of the list for draft analysts. This is something that I would like to do throughout draft season, analyze a mock, get your guys' feedback. So jump in the comment section. Do you like Daniel Jeremiah's idea here? What would you grade Daniel Jeremiah's idea for the Vikings in his mock draft? I'm curious about what you guys think of that. And then we'll look at my own. And Mr. Jeremiah and I were kind of thinking along the same lines. I'll give you a little bit of a hint there. So let's get right into it. Daniel Jeremiah will jump right to number 18, has the Minnesota Vikings in his most recent mock draft taking safety Dylan Thieneman from Oregon with the number 18 overall pick. And let me get you a little more information on Dylan Thieneman. This comes from Lance Zierlein of NFL.com and his breakdowns. This is the best resource. If you've never used these draft profiles from Lance Zierlein, the best resource at getting you an overview of every single prospect that can prepare you for draft season. This is how I do it, is, look at who Daniel Jeremiah is mocking, and then I click on their pages and read everything that Lance Zierlein has to say. So Thieneman from Oregon, 6 foot, 205 pounds. Of course, hasn't gone to the combine. We don't have official measurements yet, but that gives you a basic, not a huge guy, not any sort of specimen. But I'll tell you what stood out to me as I was reviewing this decision by Daniel Jeremiah, thinking about, well, what do I want to say about it? Do I think this is an exciting pick? Do I think this is safe? What do I think? And I got down to the part where Lance gives his overview of the prospect. And listen to this and tell me this doesn't scream Brian Flores. So first of all, his NFL comparison is Javon Holland, who was drafted by Brian Flores. And then the overview says a savvy 3-year starter with NFL size, speed, and alignment versatility. Thieneman is an extension of his defensive coordinator, aligning and adjusting the secondary to motion with pre-snap shifts. Who does this sound like? He is an instinctive, rangy safety who can roll down to a big nickel or robber position, has a good feel for play design and route concepts in zone, but has average change of direction to match breaks in man coverage. He's not a thumper near the line of scrimmage, but rushes into the action with a relentless pursuit that should allow him to keep stacking high scores in the tackle columns. Thieneman checks in the important boxes for teams looking to add versatile playmakers in their secondary. Every single thing right there in that overview sounds like a Brian Flores safety, a guy who got everybody lined up, a guy who lined up in the big nickel, but also could play deep, could play zone, and came down from the safety position to be a quality tackler. There's a lot there that clicks with a quick, instant contributor for the Minnesota Vikings. And then Javon Holland is sort of the chef's kiss there of, could you make this pick any more Minnesota Vikings? So here's what I want to know from you guys is, do you like it? Do you like the idea of the Vikings picking Dylan Theineman? That is what Daniel Jeremiah thinks they will do in his most recent mock draft. And from my perspective, I love the fit. And I've seen Dylan Theineman play with Oregon. They were on a lot of national TV games. He stands out as a very instinctual player. And I think that he is the type that you would expect. No, there's no guarantees, but you would expect to come in right away, click with this team, become a starter. And of all the positions that become starters really quickly and succeed really quickly from college, safety is at the top of the list. Now, I know that there was a other safety prospect that did not work out within the last couple drafts for the Minnesota Vikings, but normally safety is one of those where if you draft one, the guy is probably going to be a starter for you. So the debate would really come down to, all right, the guy is a good fit and he could start right away, which the Vikings would be looking for a right away starter if Harrison Smith decides to retire, which we should be within a couple weeks of getting that decision. I would expect that he would tell the franchise. Last year he told them in March, so I would assume that he was going to tell them his decision somewhere in that ballpark of right before free agency so they know what their needs are. Filling the need with someone who has a similar profile to Harrison Smith sounds good to me. The only but is the positional value. That safety is an important position. There's no doubt about it. And versatile players are important. And Harrison Smith has really proven that over the years. Certainly Nicky Manware did that this year. And there's been plenty of great safeties over the years, whether it's, Ronnie Lott or, John Lynch, like that have played on these great teams. And I think if you have an exceptional game-changing safety, that they can be worth a high draft pick. But even going back when they picked Lewis Seen, one of my concerns there was, I didn't know that it was going to turn out the way that it did, but one of my concerns was the positional value, that safeties are often available in free agency, and they also are often available in other rounds of the draft, where you can develop them from a second round pick, from a third round pick. You saw that from Xavier Watts. You can find them in free agency, as the Vikings have at times in the past, or develop players even from being undrafted free agents to turn out to be pretty good, or Cam Bynum, a fourth round pick, Josh Metellus, a sixth round pick. So, it happens all the time that these guys are kind of everywhere that can play the safety position. But the other side of that is, if you want someone to play it exceptionally, if you want someone to be a game changer in a defense that I think values safety higher, which, as I mentioned, Javon Holland, he was in Miami. That was a guy that they valued higher because in this defense, the safety is the one who's making a lot of the calls, a lot of the checks and changes, and he could come in and work with Josh Metellus right away. I like the pick from that perspective. Also, when you get to the back half of the first round, I think that you do look for best fit type of players that you like the most. And even though positional value, the wide receivers, the offensive tackles, the corners, the edge rushers, and I think DT has sort of snuck its way in there, you don't see as many linebackers, you don't see as many running backs, you don't see as many safeties taken high. And this discussion is going to go on with Caleb Downs a lot of is he worth the third overall draft pick when you play this position? But I think for Brian Flores specifically, in the 2026 and beyond defense, as long as Flores is here, that Dylan Theineman makes a lot of sense. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think of that pick from Daniel Jeremiah's mock. And just to scroll through his mock on the whole, every mock is going to start just like it did last year with Cam Ward, with Fernando Mendoza at the top. David Bailey is a guy that seems like he's going to go in the top 5 going to the New York Jets. I won't read every one, but just kind of some of the interesting players. Tennessee getting Ruben Bain. This is going to be next week a big week for Ruben Bain, but in ways that he can't really control. He can't, I mean, maybe he's like dangling from the edge of a door or something every day to try to make his arms a little longer, but I think he will still end up being a top draft pick. The Giants getting Carnell Tate. Where the wide receivers go is going to be super interesting to me, because I will be very curious if the Vikings get to a spot where they're sitting at 18 and one of these top wide receiver prospects is on the board, with uncertainty about where Jordan Addison is going and uncertainty at the quarterback position. I mean, we'll know by then who the quarterback's going to be, but it's not going to be Joe Montana. So there's still going to be, hey, can JJ take another step, or can, whatever. The best way to help that, can Kyler Murray, revitalize his career? Like, whatever the narrative's going to be, what can help that be a success is, of course, if the wide receivers are there. So I'm going to bang that drum again. I'm going to advocate if there is a good wide receiver prospect for them to strongly consider it. Last year, now Donovan Jackson, I think should be very happy with, but last year I was talking about Luther Burden. That was kind of my guy for the Vikings. Did very well with Chicago, and they feel good about having that extra playmaker. So I wouldn't count that out of a draft sim at some point from me, but not this most recent one. Arvell Reese drops to 7 here. I wonder if that's going to happen. Mekhi Lemon, the top wide receiver, he goes number 8 to the New Orleans Saints. Caleb Downs all the way down at number 10. And then we see the run on corners, and this will also impact what the Vikings do as well. If Mansour Delane goes number 11, like they've got it here, Jermod McCoy is off the board already. And here's an interesting one, is Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Daniel Jeremiah has him going all the way up at 13th, which is probably the highest that I have seen him ranked by anyone in any of these mock drafts. But he could be your classic riser if when he goes to the combine and performs and puts on a show, then he could be someone that everyone says, oh, this is the next Eamon Ware or whatever else. But him going at 13 really did surprise me to the Los Angeles Rams. Sonny Styles is someone that I am keeping a very close eye on at 15, because even though linebacker is not considered one of those positions, Sonny Styles, I thought, was just as good of a player for Ohio State's defense as Caleb Downs and Arvell Reese. Now, that doesn't mean he's just as good of a prospect, but I thought in terms of performance, he was the linchpin to their defense. Super, super instinctual coverage linebacker. Could be very valuable in a defense like this, where we've seen, Eric Wilson step in and succeed. He's got maybe a little bit of versatility to him. So he goes 15th. I wonder, if he's on the board, would the Vikings consider that? Like, there's always someone who drops a little bit more than we expect. And then right before the Vikings is the Detroit Lions taking TJ Parker, an edge rusher. And that seems very, very likely. So, I was curious, though, and let me scroll here. I actually didn't look. If Lee Hunter is another one to keep an eye on. Colton Hood, the corner, he does not have Ty Simpson going in the first round, but does have a lot of wide receivers. So there you have it. There is Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. How would we feel if that ended up happening for the Minnesota Vikings? Now, I'm going to give you a moment to grade that one. And I'm going to show you my draft simulation, the one that I did today. I ended up, wait, that's not the right one. Here we go. There it is. I ended up also taking a safety for the Minnesota Vikings. I traded down in my draft simulation from 18 to 22. And I did pass up on Caleb Banks when I traded down. Now, that would be a tough one, because a 6'6", 300 and whatever pound defensive tackle with some pass rushing upside is very attractive. And I think Downs looks to me like a very good prospect. Another guy that it might be a big week for him at the combine. But I decided not to do that. And I moved back and I took, with the 22nd pick, I made a deal with the Chargers, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And I've been watching more of him, been watching more breakdowns of him. And, well, coming from Toledo does mean that there might be somewhat of a curve, a development curve in comparison to Oregon, with a player like Thieneman that, is really versatile right off the bat. This guy's physical tools are really, really exceptional. And also, wasn't it Quinyon Mitchell who came right from Toledo right into the NFL and was playing. I mean, it doesn't have to mean like just because the guy went to a school that isn't as big as Oregon, it doesn't have to mean that he is someone's going to take years to develop. And, there's players who come from Georgia who don't develop at all, which we've also seen. It can go either way. It really depends on the individual. So I went with Emmanuel McNeil Warren. And then in the second round, I took Sam Hecht, the center from Kansas State, which of course PFF was very down. They thought I reached on McNeil Warren, which, then Daniel Jeremiah's got him up at the top. So it looks like there's a debate over McNeil Warren. Sam Hecht, though, might be the best center in the draft. Jake Slaughter, Connor Liu, like those are the three names to really watch. So Hecht was on the board. I decided to take him at 49, get them a starting safety, a starting center right off the bat. Then in the third round, I went skill players with Emmett Johnson, the running back from Nebraska, the wide receiver from Tennessee, Chris Brazel II, and then I took a corner in the 97th pick. So I did a 3-round mock, and PFF gave me an F for some reason for this pick, but Traden Stukes is the guy's name, is who I took. So I end up getting a couple DBs, a couple of weapons, and a starting center in our most recent mock. And really, the reality is it's draft season, my friends. That's what we've learned here today, is that it is draft season on the show. So let's start to get your reaction to that. And then I'll go through my list of quarterback competitions, Kyler Murray update, FanDuel question of the day. We'll get into all of that. So I'm curious about what you guys think. I mean, when it comes to, that safety position, I think if it was another team that it was a lot more replaceable, that I would probably say, I just don't like it. But in this spot, needing a commander of that defense, the way that this works out, I could definitely justify it when you're picking number 18. Mr. Mayor says, I think we need to approach the offseason assuming that we're looking for a long-term solution. I don't think there's any chance of a rookie quarterback riding in on a white horse on the 27 draft. No, I mean, it depends on how this goes. I mean, you're right that it is possible that they could approach the quarterback position like they need a multi-year answer. So that would be a Kyler Murray. It might even be a Derek Carr over a couple of years. It might be a Mac Jones over a couple of seasons. If it is just a one-year filler. Now, I saw an update on Aaron Rodgers that said that he might not even really be considering a return to Pittsburgh. So is Aaron Rodgers the one-year filler? But you're right about not assuming that the 2027 draft just has all of the answers at the quarterback position. And here's what we know. Like, the Vikings aren't going to lose 13 games, even if because you could always say, well, if they had terrible quarterback play, they even ended up last year with a winning record. They ended up in 2023 with 7 wins and a lot of close losses that year, even when they didn't have good quarterback play overall. This isn't a team that's likely to completely collapse and be drafting at the top of 2027, which means that you might need a more viable multi-year answer and then someone to pick in 27. You could also, try to be the team that moves up in the draft. I mean, that's far in the distance. I did write today about the Vikings timeline, and what I kept coming back to is, man, it's all about the quarterback. The whole timeline is totally dictated by the quarterback. Jana says, love Mr. Thieneman. Thieneman. Oh, is it Thieneman? I'm sorry. Is it I apologize. Thieneman. Okay. Gotcha. Appreciate that. Oregon fan. Okay. Thank you very much. I had not seen the official pronunciation. Dylan Thieneman. Okay. Got it. Thank you very much. Matt says, don't hate it. He's a playmaker, has an impressive highlight reel. Mr. Mayor, drafting a versatile playmaking safety sounds like a fantastic idea in a post-Hitman world. Matt says, heard he had missed tackle issues, but feel like all the things you could coach of a guy that's pretty high on the list. Yeah, I mean, missed tackle is always a little bit tricky. I know that we went through this with a discussion last year. There was somebody, maybe it was Derek Harmon, who had a high missed tackle rate. And it will happen sometimes with guys that are in on everything and they'll get missed tackles, because they're just always around the football. And if they don't bring people down, then it's, well, he had this many missed tackles, but maybe he shouldn't have even been there in the first place, but he broke into the backfield or came downhill fast enough or whatever it might have been, that sometimes will pump up that. And also, I think you're right that you can coach it a little bit. I would be curious about the numbers for if guys had struggles with tackling, if they also had struggles tackling in the NFL. I think the answer is probably yes, but of all the things, I mean, you're looking for someone who can blitz, someone who can cover in man, cover in zone, and then help out in the run game. And if there's some missed tackles from time to time, you can work your way through that. It wouldn't be a reason for me to not like someone in the first round if they've got those other skills. DLM says first round, no. Second round, yes. I have seen Thieneman mocked in the second round at times as well. And I think that has a lot to do with just the positional value. And when you think about it, how good of a prospect someone like Eamon Ware was, you look at his physical freakishness from the combine last year, had good production. And there were a lot of people that watched him play that said, I think that the narrative about him maybe being raw or whatever was a little bit based on the maybe perception rather than reality of like, oh, it's the athletic freak who doesn't really know how to play versus Malachi Starks, who was the guy who really knew football but wasn't as athletic. I mean, it kind of fit this perfect, this guy versus this guy type of situation. And a lot of people who really watched him play closely said that's not really the case. He isn't stiff as an athlete, or he isn't somebody that, had a very simple assignment or whatever. And he turned out to be a huge star right away, but that wasn't a high draft pick. I mean, that was somebody that was taken, what was he, early day 2 last year? Someone that athletic with that much upside, which does make you think that Thieneman could possibly be someone that is not needed to take at the 18th overall pick. And even, Jeremiah having McNeil Warren in the top 15, and then, PFF has not even a good grade for me getting him at number 22 because they think he's going to go much more like in the second round. DLM says you could sign safeties still at a relatively low cost. You don't get the equity in the first round where you could get better value. Yes. And Holland was a second rounder. That's right. Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Flores was the one who picked him, right? So they could wait until the second round to do that. How it plays out, and when you start doing the draft simulations, and normally what I do is I will do a one-time only draft sim. I will just start it up, fire it up, whatever. The first time through, I'll take it. But this last time, I was kind of like, I'm going to need to try a couple more times to get something that I feel like is more realistic and to see how I want to play it from round 1 to round 2. Because what they do in round 1 impacts round 2. There's enough positions that the Vikings are looking for that you could make a case for, where you could say, well, if you get a defensive tackle in round 1, then you might have to get your center in round 2. Or if you get your running back in round 2, then you might have to get your center in round 3. Or maybe center is something that they will sign in free agency and won't be looking at in the draft by the time we get there. Free agency is going to change a lot of stuff. But I mean, I think that you're being very fair to say, I'm just not sure that the positional value is quite there. At the same time, these first round, Harrison Smith was a first round safety. If you haven't heard, Kyle Hamilton was a first round safety. Derwin James. There's been the guys who have put their name in that conversation often have turned into very good players. Not always, but often. Ron says, hopefully Hitman doesn't take as long as Aaron Rodgers to decide. I think he'll figure it out shortly. I think it will be at least in the next couple of weeks. Mr. Mayor, Flores uses safeties like crazy. I feel we need a starter at the position if we can get one. And that's why, Thieneman is not a crazy idea, even if the positional value isn't there in general, broadly. But for somebody who has to come in and play multiple different positions and has to really understand a defense inside and out, that's maybe worth that kind of a draft pick for this specific scenario. It's like back in the day, the Denver Broncos ran that outside zone all the time, right? Gary and Mike Shanahan and Elway. So they needed offensive linemen who could do that. And they needed a Tom Nalen. And I don't know why this is the example. Although, look, you could get it wrong that way. That is an example, but you could get it wrong that way. In that offense, you kind of need a star for the outside zone to really dominate. But the Vikings put a little too much emphasis on that and picked Garrett Bradbury in the first round. So maybe just sticking to principles there. I don't know that the Vikings will stick to positional value principles because they haven't really done that in recent years. And I mean, they picked a guard last year in the first round, who's a good guard, and guards are growing in importance, but still, it's not like they've only picked edge rushers, wide receivers, corners, and so forth. But that would be a counter argument. If you say, hey, for this scenario, it makes a ton of sense, then you could say, well, so did Bradbury, and Bradbury's a starting center for a very long time. It's not like he was a miss of a draft pick, but if you don't get excellent play out of that guy, then you're going to say, exactly what was, I think DLM was saying earlier then you're just not getting your bang for buck unless the guy's really great. Sean says, love this pick. Don't get cute and try to trade down. Just pick the dude at 18 and get an instant day one starter. So when you say getting cute, the one issue I have with that is that it's often much better to trade down statistically. Like in my draft simulation, I end up getting an extra day 2 pick in the third round. Like that's better for me to trade down. I get what you're saying. The Vikings traded down that one time and it blew up in their face. They also traded down when they drafted Darisaw. And that was a great move by Rick Spielman to move back. And I think it was Vera Tucker ended up going to the New York Jets, and he's become a decent player, but they moved down and ended up still getting Darisaw and picking up extra draft capital. So it's not something that it never works. It's often a good idea, and to get more draft picks is really what they need to do in this draft for the long term. I don't expect them to take any sort of long-term approach to this draft because they need starters right away. That's why you could see, someone like, Thieneman being picked this high because they want a starter right away. But make no mistake, we need to also consider that the most efficient and smart things to do is how we should grade them. And trading down from 18 might be the most efficient and smart thing to do rather than taking a safety there, because that would feel like, once again, they're bucking those things that have been proven over a long period of time to work, which you can do and still hit sometimes. But if you're going to consistently do that, it may bite you. KFT says Thieneman is not worth taking in the first round. They should take a defensive tackle or corner. Damani Jackson is the 5th round cornerback that could be an outstanding safety. Okay, I haven't gotten that deep into 5th round safeties yet. DLM says in this mock, Peter Woods is still on the board. No way I'm passing on Woods for a safety that isn't Caleb Downs. I'm not so sure what to do with Woods because when I look at his data, it's just not that impressive. And that's a position that is correlated very strongly with, if you have this level of pass rush win rate, this level of quarterback pressures and so forth, it's very predictive for what guys are going to be. But if you're below that, it's usually been predictive of guys that do not reach their ceiling as a pass rusher. Now, maybe Woods would be a dominant run defender, and that could be worth more than it used to be. But if you want to talk about a position that's generally replaceable, like in free agency, run stuffing DT is often that. I guess I'm going to have to see more about Peter Woods and what the analysts think of him, because it's felt like he's the top name that's been out there and thrown about. And yet it's just hard to find, where is the special part of him? If Thieneman, the special part is that he's super versatile, high intelligence, can do a lot of different things, well, that makes sense to me. But if you're talking about, well, he's kind of good as a run stuffer, kind of good as a pass rusher, is the upside really there? At the same time, you usually have to get good defensive tackles in the first round. That has been clearly proven, whereas safeties you can get in other places. I think it's a fair argument. DLM says Denzel Boston could be a nice pick at wide receiver. You are not going to have to twist my arm to get me to like wide receiver picks. Definitely not. I think they should do it. If you're giving me my choice right now, if you said they have to stay at number 18, what should they do? I would say take the best wide receiver on the board. Because yes, you have these other, well, you need a safety, well, you need a defensive tackle, well, you need a center, but who's going to bring more value right away if the guy clicks? And then in the long term, it allows you, if the person works out, to walk away from Jordan Addison and then have another cheap wide receiver next to Justin Jefferson. Also gives you a year to find out if that guy is going to be something for the future. It was the same logic of picking Ty Felton last year. I don't know what Felton's going to be, but more rolls at the dice at the wide receiver position. Felton was also the last pick of the third round. Like, that's much more likely to become a role player as opposed to a first rounder where you're taking right in that same ballpark as where you got Justin Jefferson. The potential is very, very high. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba was not the first pick overall, right? Like, you've seen a lot of successful picks in the middle or back end of the first round at the wide receiver position. I'm going to bang the table for it as always, but in doing my draft sim, I was trying to be kind of realistic of slide down a few spots, take a big time potential playmaker, and then fill some needs rather than taking the guy that I know I would take, which is, Denzel Boston if he was on the board. KFT, I think McNeil Warren could end up being a perennial Pro Bowl safety, but I would be reluctant to take him at pick 18. That's kind of why I traded down and took him, because his physical tools look that way as well. They look like if you meet a certain threshold of physical ability at the safety position, then you can make it an impact that's different, that's just on another level from what your average good safety can do. So if McNeil Warren is that guy and you trade down and you grab some extra draft capital and then do it, but Jeremiah's draft having him go at 13 is wild. Whoa, okay. So is the league turning into, all about the safeties? And what we hear is this draft just not being the same in terms of depth of talent might, push some teams to go get their guy early on rather than saying, well, positional value or whatever. Like, no, we just like this guy and this is not a great draft, so we're doing it. Zen Clover, Brazel in the third. I'm thinking he will go early to mid second. Great pick if he's still there. Yeah, so I was looking at his trend line today before I drafted him. One of the things that's nice in PFF's mock draft simulator is they have where guys have been moving in mocks and big boards. And his dropped, but it was pretty high, like in the second round. Every year has a guy or two that just sneaks through the cracks because of the way the cookie crumbles. And I grabbed him there. But I think that if you are going to go with defense early, try to fill that center spot, then you are looking at trying to get those skill players later on. DLM says Emmett Johnson III would be nice. This is not, from my understanding, a running back class that has a bunch of guys that are expected to be next level. But Emmett Johnson's a very smooth runner. I saw a good amount of him this year with Nebraska. I like him as a fit. What I'd really like for the Vikings is somebody who ran like a 4.29 and had rockets in their feet. That's not really him, but young legs could be used in that backfield, and just feels like they haven't had a lot of bursts since Dalvin Cook was here in quite some time. SWAT, what do you think of Max Bredesen for the last pick? Is that a fullback? You said FB. Is that a fullback? I don't know. I don't know who that is. If that's a fullback, then yes. The answer is yes. Justin is a Washington-based Oregon fan, Vikings fan. Okay. Jay says your draft is like Kwesi, you're fired. How's it like? I mean, you trade down and draft a safety. I get it. It's really what it actually is trying to project what coaches would do if they're doing it. That's what I've been doing with the draft sim. I have not yet done I do the draft sim as me as the GM. I've been doing it as what's a realistic projection of how I think they're going to approach it. So just for the record, even when I did the, Kristen Miller pick a couple of days ago, I think I got Jake Slaughter too. It's still, how can they fill the needs that they might want to fill in the draft, and not so much, hey, this is what old Purple Insider would do. Purple Insider's taking a wide receiver, breaking news. and I'll get whatever else I need later. But that's what I'm taking in the first round if there's one there when I do this is exactly what I would do in my theoretical world. Just call you Kib. Like Thieneman, my question is how much can we trust PFF? They have them available in the second in most mocks. Well, you can't trust anyone's mocks because they're just mocks and no one knows how it's going to play out. But there is a little bit of, I think, positional value that's built into that with the PFF board, that PFF, of course, is going to usually push down centers, running backs, linebackers, safeties, because those tend, and interior offensive linemen, because those tend to be the positions that are not paid as much in the NFL. And when we talk about positional value, that's really what it means. You hear it all the time. It's not just, does this matter to your football team? It's that 32 teams have decided what matters the most to your football team. And they have decided that the guys who get paid are wide receivers, edge rushers, and what you're looking for is the widest possible gap between your young rookie player and what the top free agents are being paid. So if you draft Justin Jefferson in 2020 and he is instantly a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, then your gap between what the top receivers are making at that time, which was probably 20 million, and Jefferson making, I don't know, 4, that's value right there. That's positional value. Whereas if you draft a safety and the top safeties are making, right now, top quarterbacks now are making 60 and wide receivers are making 40. Safeties are still making like 20. So if you draft the top guy versus the top paid, your positional value is not the same, if that makes sense. Is that gap surplus value between what you're getting? But in terms of like an actual impact on the field, I think that in certain circumstances, you have safeties and centers and linebackers. Fred Warner was a 3rd round draft pick, but he's an example of, if you get somebody that good, that's what I think of those positions though. It has to be that good in order to justify it. So can Thieneman or McNeil Warren, can they be that good to justify that high of a draft pick? But in terms of, can you trust this mock or trust that? No, I don't know. Nobody really knows exactly how it's going to play out. I think that we'll see more compressed after the combine. After everybody goes there, after there's a lot of chatter, a lot of conversations going on, after we've got all the data, then you'll be able to check off some boxes for some guys or say, wow, okay, this guy's definitely going higher than we expected because look what he did at the combine. We'll have, I think, a little more closer to consensus there. But there's going to be differing opinions. How much somebody fits in a certain environment is going to differ sometimes. Nano Joe, is Theo Jackson replaceable? Yeah, I think Theo Jackson, by the end of the year, you saw that he is a role player. Like, he can be in there, I think, in nickel, dime packages, 3rd downs. I don't know that he's an every single down type player. He's more of a deep safety that can make plays on the football. But his issue was coming up in run defense. And that's why we saw more of Jay Ward. Now, they might like Jay Ward, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson as a trio. I just don't know if they do. I think you want to have Metellus in the box as much as you possibly can. Jay says that was a terrible draft. I would grade it a D. You must be talking about my draft. You really hated it, huh? Let's go back to it. So I end up getting a top safety prospect, a starting center, a starting running back, a wide receiver, and then a corner depth. You really hated it that much, huh? Those seem like things that would be realistic for the Vikings to draft. If you're putting yourself in their shoes and you're saying, all right, well, let's just assume Harrison Smith just retired. Let's look at the center position, which is not easily replaced. There's 3 guys worth anything in free agency. Linderbaum is not coming here more likely than not because of his price. Luke Fortner, Cade Mays. These are just guys at that position. Fortner might be a bit above, but we're not talking about exceptional. So you might need to draft a center. Again, I know that these are not the top positional value. It just feels really realistic is what they would look for. They need someone in the backfield. They could use another wide receiver weapon. I don't know. If they did that, you could certainly say that you didn't like it if they did it. That's what I was trying to do, is project what they might be thinking. DLM says Brian Parker is a beast. Is that the guy from Duke? Offensive lineman. Might be a little later on. Jay thinks that Thieneman will go before the next pick that the Vikings have in the second round, which I think is also probably true. If you're a very good safety prospect, the latest you're going to go is maybe the top half of day 2 if you're a good one. KFT, like Chris Johnson from San Diego State. I've seen his name pop up a few times. It seems like we're just kind of throwing out names, though, at that point. Vikings TW, what are the analytics saying about Lee Hunter? So with all the defensive tackles, I haven't found any numbers that say, wow. Like, remember a couple years ago with Kalijah Cansey, it's just, wow, this guy's numbers are unbelievable, but he's undersized or whatever. Lee Hunter's numbers are fine. Like, they look like kind of an above average type of second round prospect to me at the defensive tackle position. My understanding is at the Senior Bowl, he was very good, but they don't blow you away. Lee Hunter's data. And that's the issue with the defensive tackle group, is even like Caleb Banks has got good numbers for 2024. Then he had an injury. So that one's a little bit hard to tell. Denny says Vikings like to think they're playing chess in the draft, but it's been more like Parcheesi. Well, it would be like playing chess with half the pieces is really what it is. I don't think that the Vikings have done anything in years that was bold in the draft. I really don't. I don't even think that 2022 was that bold. They got a bevy of picks to trade back. Then they made a trade up to get Andrew Booth Jr. The guys just didn't work out. I didn't think it was nuts what they did. It was probably overdoing it. But even then, when you looked at it, it's like, well, some charts like it, some charts don't like it. But if those players had worked out, no one would have had any complaints. I was not for trading back that far. My issue is that that's where the Hall of Famers are drafted normally in the top 15. So take your swing at trying to get a Pro Bowler, All-Pro, Hall of Fame type of player, rather than moving completely out of that position to where it's just dice rolls and guys with lower ceilings and guys that are more flawed. The hit rates drop so significantly from the top 12 to 14 to the back end of the first that I just wasn't interested in doing that. And I remember being a little bit critiqued by Vikings fans that night when I was not very high on what they did, but I would still say it's a shock that those players didn't work out that well. And then the last couple drafts, there's been nothing bold there at all. There hasn't been 3D chess. It's just been as routine as you could possibly get for drafting, as average and unexciting, which has worked out in some ways. Jordan Addison and I think Donovan Jackson. I guess the bold one was Dallas Turner, which is, as far as what Dallas Turner is still yet to be determined. I think he showed a lot of flashes last year and had overall a pretty good season. It's mostly a good second half of the season. Okay, that was bold. But out of the entire time of drafting, it's not like I never felt like, wow, they're trying to hack the draft. It never felt like that. It felt like, well, this is another team in the league who's doing stuff. So maybe this year that'll change, but I'd be surprised. That's why the draft sim ends up as being like, yeah, that's pretty much what I would expect from them, is to try to fill needs with good prospects, but not exactly looking at, well, they're going to make crazy trades or they're going to, get a wide receiver. They might get a wide receiver, but they're going to get a wide receiver because it's the most positional value or whatever. Like, I don't really expect that. If they do, then I will be delighted because that's kind of my thing. But as of right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they went with something like safety and center with the first two picks. Sort of like where they were in 2019 when they picked Bradbury and Irv Smith. It's like, we need a center. We need a tight end. We're desperate to win this year because we all know we're in big trouble if we don't. So we're filling needs. It's not theoretically the best way to do it, but sometimes it works out. Dan, which players who may realistically fall to the top 10 might be worth a trade up. Well, let's go back to Daniel Jeremiah's draft here and take a look. Here we go. So what guys that are in the top 10-ish could drop out? Well, there's a lot of edge players in this draft, and there's a lot of linemen, which could mean, so Sonny Styles is probably my answer to that. The Ohio State linebacker, he's got him at 15, but now trading up is not my favorite for this Vikings situation, but could they do that if they were looking for somebody special like Sonny Styles, or if they were looking at a receiver and they wanted Jordan Tyson, or one of these corners? I think Mansour Delane, remember with corners, these mocks always have corners super high, and it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, you could say that for a lot of different positions, but I'm just thinking of the Joey Porter Jr. This guy's a top 15 draft pick, doesn't end up being taken there. So there's always a corner that sinks. I mean, the answer is probably pretty clearly Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Love. I mean, everyone has the Kansas City Chiefs taking Jeremiah Love. They've kind of signaled that from space that they would like to do that, but and their backfield has just not been that good. But Caleb Downs is probably the answer to that question for me. That, if you're going to talk about a player that if they started to slide down the board a little bit, that you would mortgage some future to go get, it's probably him, and he's probably worth it. Scamping around, can a rookie safety learn to get enough of 80 to 90% of Harrison Smith's ability to manipulate the defensive play calling? So no, they can't. I mean, even if you're a very high IQ player currently, it's hard to get to 90% of Harrison Smith because that guy is 37 and has been a great NFL player who's seen everything and anything. But what you could do is have someone still be a versatile piece, have Josh Metellus call the defense and take over that Harrison Smith role, and someone like Dylan Thieneman or Emmanuel McNeil-Warren play next to him, and they're just doing their job. They're just, all right, that guy's making the calls, and you're hearing the call and doing what you're supposed to do, but their physical ability, their versatility, like that's what's making a difference early on. And then your hope is that long-term, they are able to develop that sixth sense and continue to be a really good player. But you can be an impact player right away with what I think is instincts is such a huge deal at the safety position. And this is having seen Cam Bynum work out, high IQ, great instincts. And Anthony Harris, high IQ, great instincts. Andrew Sandejo is maybe a little bit of a different player because he was a rocket out there that sometimes was out of control with the way he hit people, but he had good instincts for going and get the football, and he would get interceptions and was a high IQ football player next to Harrison Smith. Their communication was great. So you can have that success right away and then build into what you're trying to get ultimately, because, no one's going to come in and be able to be Harrison Smith. It would be Josh Metellus handling that right away. Mr. Mayor, I think that Cashman takes over quarterback of the defense role. Doesn't exactly work that way because, well, he's the defensive play caller, so he is in charge of what he's in charge of. But it doesn't work that way in terms of, like, he's not going to suddenly call the secondary. That's got to be a safety. I mean, I guess it could be a corner to some extent. Byron Murphy is involved in the communication, but it really has to be a safety that's making the moves from back there and playing that chess game with the quarterback. And Cashman is more involved in the front seven and how they align themselves and so forth. But I mean, these guys are all important. Like Byron Murphy at corner, and the safety who's calling out the defense there, and the linebacker who's taking in the plays. Like, all these guys are very important in terms of the communication of the defense, which is at the very top of reasons that Brian Flores has had so much success. Let's see. Denny says thinks Hitman is coming back. I never know with Harrison. He's a mysterious man. It really felt like it was over at the end. Really felt like it was not going to continue into this year with how emotional he was about those last games. But, things could change in a couple of months. Matt says could live with Love at 18. don't really see a top 10 talent. I mean, I think Jeremiah Love is a top 10 talent in this draft. And it really is going to come down to if somebody wants to make the investment in a running back, which we've seen teams do. We've seen Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen Bijan Robinson. It's not like the league has collectively fully decided we are never going to do this. And in a draft like this, for sure, you could see somebody saying, well, why not reach to just get the best player? If he were to get to like 13 or 14, would the Vikings say, all right, let's just go for it? I wouldn't endorse that necessarily, but man, we never really talk about this. It's so much of like, it's KOC's fault. It's KOC's fault with the run game. And I don't disagree that the run identity has not really been there. Run scheme, I think, has been just average. It's just another run scheme in the league. There's nothing about it that really shines. But also, who have they had in the backfield that's been really good? I mean, the first half of 2022 with Dalvin Cook, where it seemed like he still had burst, he was over 5 yards a carry. And that wasn't a great offensive line. But they have not had anybody in that backfield that you would say, man, they can get that ball and make something special happen. Aaron Jones has been good. And I thought Jordan Mason was good last year. I thought that Alexander Madison was good in a certain role, not as the starter, but it was, and you even had some moments of Ty Chandler that were good, but somebody who is a true, complete, excellent running back in the backfield is something that Kevin O'Connell has not had. And a lot of times, I mean, that's what anything comes down to, as we saw at the quarterback position, but it goes for anything. It's if you've got a really good quarterback, if you've got wide receivers who get open, if you've got an offensive line, like all these things can make the play caller look so much smarter or so much dumber than they actually are. Okay, I want to give you the, let's get you the FanDuel question of the day. Oh, did my mic just go fuzzy? Did that sound weird to you guys? Do I need to like plug this back in? Tell me if that sounded like a little weird to you guys. Suddenly in my headphones, it sounds kind of distorted. I'm going to just take a second and unplug and plug back in. Okay. All right. That sounds like it's fixed. Sorry about that, guys. All of a sudden I sounded like, I am Iron Man or something, or at least in my headphones. You'll have to tell me. Yeah, it was a little weird that all of a sudden that happened. Okay. Yeah, a little fuzzy. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. The dog came downstairs and maybe he bumped something and it disconnected for a second. All right, well, let's go to yeah, it should be fixed now. It sounds fine in my headphones. I should have done it though. I should have done the I am Iron Man. Okay, I want to bring you the FanDuel question of the day, which is Ty Simpson. I'm intrigued with Ty Simpson, not in the way that I think he's good, but in the way that people are going to try to shoehorn Ty Simpson into this draft in the first round. And I wonder if anyone's actually going to do it or not. It felt that way in 2022 with the Kenny Pickett's and the Desmond Ritters and Malik Willis, that, there was a lot of attempts to talk about those guys as first round prospects, and that turned out to be wrong. Shadur Sanders last year. Are the Ty Simpson people going to be really wrong is something I'm very curious about. So the FanDuel question of the day is this. Ty Simpson right now is 10,000, plus 10,000 to go number one overall. So obviously that's just there's no chance of that happening. But would you be interested in him if you're the Vikings? Were he to be the guy that drops into the third round? Like, does that intrigue you, or does the idea of a development quarterback intrigue you at all for the Vikings in this draft? For me, the answer is not really no, because we've gone down the Kellen Mond road, and for every Brock Purdy, there's 50 other Jaron Halls that are just a waste of a draft pick that could have at least been maybe a special teamer or something. So I've never really been into that. I always think, hey, get your guy and make him your guy. And every once in a while, somebody's going to develop. But in the playoffs, I think everyone was a first round pick except for Brock Purdy or something like that, right? Usually it takes that huge investment. But I'm curious what you guys think. Like, if Ty Simpson got to the third, are you intrigued with that idea or, not really? So that's the FanDuel question of the day. Also, I made a list of quarterback competition QBs for this offseason for the Minnesota Vikings. So if you recall the other day, my list was these are the guys if they need a starter. And that was Kyler Murray. And that was, I left Geno Smith accidentally off the list, but then I thought, maybe not that much of an accident. But that was the Kyler Murray, the Derek Carr, the Daniel Jones, who it seems like in Indianapolis, they believe that they're going to be able to keep, but you never know. So I put him on the list and we went from there. This is the list of if they are not done with JJ McCarthy, if they want JJ McCarthy to have a good chance to prove what he can do, and they don't want to go out and get someone that has to be the starter. I mean, if you get Kyler Murray, Kyler is starting. It's not a competition. It's not a QB battle. It's Kyler Murray is your starting quarterback. Well, that would not be the case for anyone on this list that I made for tonight. This list is entirely based on guys who would come in, compete with McCarthy, and if they won the job, maybe you wouldn't feel so bad about it and you could win games with, but if they lose the job, then all right, that means that McCarthy has played pretty well. So here is the list. Number 1 is Mac Jones. Mac is a backup quarterback for San Francisco. If you trade a 3rd round pick for him, you don't have to start him. You're not locked into him forever. He can be your backup. He's been a backup with Jacksonville. He's been a backup with San Francisco. Fine. That's not a huge deal to me. If you get a 3rd round pick for a backup quarterback, heck, they didn't have a very good backup quarterback last year in Carson Wentz, and that turned out to be a mistake. So that would be at least correcting that mistake, and it sets a nice bar for JJ McCarthy. If you can't beat out Mac Jones, then you're probably at least not ready for this or not going to work out. Number 2 on my list, but I also think they could make the playoffs with Mac Jones. Like if it went right, they could make the playoffs. Number 2 is Geno Smith. I think Geno Smith is fine for this, for bringing in at maybe no cost really whatsoever to compete with JJ McCarthy. And if McCarthy can't beat out Geno Smith, it might be one of the most ridiculous years we've ever seen from a Vikings quarterback. I mean, 30 touchdowns, 30 picks that Jameis Winston did, like sounds like a challenge for a Geno Smith, but he's been an air it out type of guy. And you'd have to shift your offense to the shotgun a little bit more for Geno, but he still has a big arm. He could still throw the ball, and I promise you Justin Jefferson's getting a lot of catches. But also, he's been a backup for the most of his career, and if he ended up being a backup again, okay, that's totally fine. You're not going to have to give up so much that you're going to feel like it's a problem. But if Geno starts, he won 10 games his last year. He won 10 games. So, number 3 is Marcus Mariota, who actually overall, when you look at his numbers last year, we didn't see the very good version of Marcus Mariota, but you look at his downfield passing from last season, it was pretty good. And he's had a relationship with Kevin O'Connell for a long time, going out back to when he came out in the draft. So Mariota, I think, is a guy that under these circumstances and earlier in his career, he took a team to the playoffs. He won a playoff game in really kind of strange and comical fashion that opened up the door for Kansas City to move on from Alex Smith. But, when it comes to Marcus Mariota, he can certainly throw the ball. I think you are concerned about inconsistency and maybe thinking that if you give him Justin Jefferson, he'll be better off. But considering how bad Washington was, Terry McLaurin was in and out of the lineup. Deebo Samuel didn't have a lot left. Their defense was horrendous. I thought overall he played pretty decently last year. So I put Kirk as 4th on my list here because I don't know if Kirk would actually come here to be a part of a competition. That was my question. If he would, and if he was okay with being the backup if JJ McCarthy beats him out, then all right. I mean, that's a heck of a good backup. Atlanta put in Kirk after losing Penix and won some games and made things interesting there. I think Kirk is good for that, but it really depends on, would he come back to Minnesota where he was the guy for so long to be someone else with any chance of being someone else's backup? I tend to think the answer is no, but I'm not really sure where Kirk is at in his career. Like, would he be willing to do it for KOC to come back? And if McCarthy can't improve, then you know that he knows the offense. I'm very hit or miss on that idea, but I put him as number 4 on the list because I'd probably prefer to have Mac Jones, younger, Geno Smith, crazy arm, no Achilles tear, and Mariota, who threw the ball downfield well last year, rather than Cousins, where it feels like the upside is just pretty low. Mr. Mayor says the Geno is not interested in mentoring young quarterbacks. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that that's a little bit overrated. I just think that idea is a little bit overrated of mentoring quarterbacks. I mean, Joe Flacco said that at one point. I mean, Joe Flacco's actually said that multiple times. Like, I'm here to work. It doesn't really, as long as you're not actively making it much worse for someone, if you're just going about and doing your job, I don't necessarily need you to put your arm around JJ McCarthy and say, I love you, man. He was the backup for Russell Wilson for a long time. Like, he could be a backup quarterback, but if he wins the job, then it's probably kind of over for McCarthy anyway. So it doesn't really matter if he's mentoring him or not. Like, you're trying to win with Geno Smith at that point. Number 5 on my list is Anthony Richardson. I do not have much faith at all in Anthony Richardson's ability to take the big step that he needs to take, for all the arguments that are brought up about how Josh Allen improved his accuracy. I present you with Anthony Richardson, who has never really had a chance to do so between injuries, didn't really show the maturity level ready to be a starter in the NFL, had some exciting moments, but Kevin O'Connell liked Anthony Richardson in the draft, supposedly. And there is that clip that was going around again, not too long ago, of O'Connell, and what he said about, to Anthony Richardson after the Vikings beat them, the Colts in 2024, where he said, like, hey, your team still believes in you and I believe in you, or something like that, and gave him some encouraging words. So he might think, well, trade a 6th round pick for Richardson, get him into the QB competition. I'm down for that. I'm down for take a swing and you never know with Anthony Richardson. Number 6 on my list is Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is probably serviceable for a half a season. I don't know if he could take a season's worth of punishment as a starting quarterback. I would say he can throw the ball. At one time, he threw it pretty well, but the last time we saw him as a starter, he was not throwing it that well. It's an idea for someone who could probably get you 8 or 9 wins or bounce in and out of the lineup. He's had success before, and he's a veteran quarterback, and he would be the healthiest he's ever been because he hasn't played in a while. But that feels very Carson Wentz-y, and I don't know. I mean, at least he's played at a fairly high level. I would not have, by the way, I would not have Carson Wentz in this list because I don't think there's any sort of competition there. I think that he would be just entirely a backup. Wentz, I don't believe can start. He doesn't really have the history to suggest that he does. You have to go back a long way. At least Jimmy Garoppolo somewhat recently has had good performances. So I threw him in at number 6. Number 7 is Davis Mills. There's like a section of people that like Davis Mills. When I look at the way that he played for the Texans, it was very much do not screw up. And that's how I'm playing. And then when he played more aggressively complete quarterback, he screwed up a lot earlier in his career. That is a very low ceiling option of if you were going to play where you run 55% of the time and then hit some play actions and just try to be the lowest turnover rate in the NFL, Davis Mills is probably your guy. And my bottom 3 here, 8, 9, and 10, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, and Zach Wilson. And I thought about putting Brett Favre at the bottom just because once you start to get to the Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, Zach Wilson, it's like you could insert almost anybody into those positions. Flacco would be fine if it was a pure backup. Wentz was fine as a pure backup option. I mean, he won 2 out of 4 at one point and then got bludgeoned in that last one. I don't think there's any upside of Zach Wilson. He has an arm. He's shown nothing anywhere as a backup to make me think, oh yeah, he's that reclamation project that is going to be the next Baker Mayfield or something. I don't look at it that way. It's just a guy I threw on the list for the heck of it because my other choice was Mitch Trubisky. And Mitch Trubisky is no kind of competition. That's the thing. It has to be competition. It has to be real competition. I honestly probably should have just left Zach Wilson off because there's no reason to think he could compete in the NFL. But, Jameis Winston would be real competition in training camp. It would be absurd if he was the quarterback here with the downfield passing, and he's just so out of control when he's out there that I don't think you're getting into the playoffs. I think that guys like Garoppolo and Flacco likely can't make it an entire season as your starter, and Davis Mills' ceiling is super low. So really the only choices that I kind of like are Mac Jones and Geno Smith and maybe Marcus Mariota if they are having a real quarterback competition. And you'd have to tell me if it's real with Kirk. And you could just go get Anthony Richardson if you want to for the heck of it. Like you could get Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson, and JJ McCarthy and then do Hard Knocks or something. A-Truck and Kenny Pickett. Sure. Put Kenny Pickett instead of Zach Wilson. That's totally fine. I don't think that's real competition though. I think that's just a backup quarterback. The only reason I put Wilson in there is because theoretically there is some upside to Zach Wilson. That is in deep, deep theory. Vikings TW, Jimmy G is probably the best option if they want JJ to take over and have a fallback guy. Yeah, so there's also kind of in this list degrees of competition. Like if you bring in Mac Jones, you might feel like there's a really good chance Mac Jones is winning the job. If you bring in Geno Smith, you're probably going to think that too. With Mariota, it's, all right, doors open, kid, but it's your in case of emergency. With Kirk, I think it'd be much more of a real competition if Kirk would agree to that. But I don't know. I think it feels like Kirk is only going to come here if he's told, yeah, dude, you're the starter. Everybody below that, I mean, Anthony Richardson is not, I mean, that's only competition if Anthony Richardson has it really clicked. Like in that case, you want JJ McCarthy to win the job and you're setting it up for him to win the job. It's not quite Sam Howell because Richardson has a much higher upside than that, but it's also not that different either. And Jimmy Garoppolo would be that kind of, okay, in case of emergency. I think that for most of those guys, some of these you got to stretch on to make them really, really work. Speaking of Kyler Murray, there was an update on Kyler Murray from Adam Schefter over the weekend. So let me read you two quotes from Adam Schefter, and you could tell me who you like from my list, or if you disagree with it, continue to have that discussion there in the chat. So Adam Schefter on Kyler Murray said the Dolphins would like to explore trading Tua Tagovailoa and ditto, good for you, Adam, using the word ditto, for the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. So they both want to explore trades, but it remains unclear whether a deal for either quarterback is feasible given the financial hurdles for an acquiring team. Trading Murray would create $34.7 million in cap savings for the Cardinals while leaving $17.9 million in dead money, which would seem to be a more attractive alternative if Arizona could find a trade partner. So what this comes down to is whether there's a team out there with a ton of cap space that wants to take on Kyler Murray or not. Because for the Minnesota Vikings, well, they can create a decent amount of cap space. They can't create that much cap space unless they wanted to do nothing else and then be filling out their roster again with UDFAs and late round draft picks and stuff like that. I don't think that's how they want to go about it. So if the Vikings are going to get Kyler Murray, it likely has to be him getting cut or for a trade that would have the Cardinals taking back a high percentage of that. Now, maybe, it says they're creating $34.7 million. I mean, maybe you're talking about like a third of that coming to Minnesota and Arizona eating 2/3. It's hard to work out unless for the Vikings, unless Arizona's taking on a lot of that cap hit. But historically, when you have players like this that come along with a gigantic contract and you know that the team has to move on, most of the time they just cut the guy. And I know that there's been some discussion of like, LaFleur gave his press conference, I think today, and he was saying, well, nothing's really decided yet with Kyler Murray. But if you're saying nothing's decided with a quarterback who's been around that long, it probably means that you guys are moving on. And Schefter has talked about how it seems like almost a guarantee. Every report that's out there is that they're moving on from Kyler. If everyone knows that, well, then why trade anything unless you have a ton of cap space and you really, really want to do this? But even teams that are horrible, like the Jets and the Browns, these teams don't have great cap situations. The Miami Dolphins are cutting everybody. I mean, maybe to make some space to sign Malik Willis if they could get their hands on him, but they wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for a Kyler trade because they're going to be in trouble with Tua and his situation. So I'm struggling. Maybe you guys have a team that would take on that much money, but I don't know who that is. I think they're going to have to just cut him and eat it, kind of like with Denver and Russell Wilson. That's how it looks to me when you lay it out like that. There was another Dolphin, Minkah Fitzpatrick, apparently, according to Jordan Schultz. The Dolphins have just been cutting everybody. Tyreek Hill, James Daniels, Bradley Chubb. And today, Jordan Schultz reported that there have been trade talks going on with Minkah Fitzpatrick and the Dolphins to try to move on from him. Now, I looked at his contract, $18 million for this year. Very, very rich for Minkah Fitzpatrick, who at one time was really highly regarded. I think has slipped off that pedestal, but could be a guy of interest for the Vikings if they were to not be able to find a partner and release Minkah Fitzpatrick. Also, you can, at least according to overthecap.com, restructure his deal to bring it down a bit. For somebody who's been great, but not in a while at that position, I would not really have a lot of interest in paying excess money for it. So I think this time of year, what happens is someone gets cut and then everyone's like, should we get him? And most of the time the answer is probably no, but that's a thing that's happening. So I thought I would bring that to the table as well. Let's get back to your thoughts here. A truck and the Dolphins could go 3-14. That's what they want to do. I mean, that's what they should be trying to do. That team, I mean, hey, their owner is good with tanking because that's where a lot of the conflict with Brian Flores stems from. So their owner's good with it. He's good with tanking, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what he's doing now. Jimmy G is only 34. I don't think you get to say only when you get to 30s. Only is like if he was 29. Mr. Mayor, if I was the Niners GM, I would hardline a not moving Jones unless it's for a second. Might as well keep a backup quarterback. Well, the thing about that played well, the thing about Kyle Shanahan is he might believe that he can always find the next Sam Darnold or Mac Jones to be a backup for him. And why not just take whatever to the highest bidder? But considering that Mac Jones saved their season last year, they don't have to do that. They do not have to do that. They could absolutely just do what you're saying. Like, hey, unless you make us really, really make a move there, then we're not going to do it. I see that we have some folks that are maybe higher than I am with Davis Mills. Mark says Davis Mills over CJ Stroud. I don't agree with that. Corey says Davis Mills' ceiling is Case Keenum. Okay, now I don't think they're a different style of player. Mark says he put Davis Mills number 2 for that. Well, that's definitely not a great list. So if you wanted to put Davis Mills at 2, you can. When I look at those games that he won, I didn't see really good quarterback play. I saw did not implode, and they had the best defense in the league. I don't know if that's what you're really looking for. If you want J.J. McCarthy to succeed, then yes, but you're giving up draft capital for someone's backup that doesn't have much of a high ceiling. At very least with a Mac Jones, I think his ceiling as a starter is higher. I don't think it's the Super Bowl, but it's higher. It's a guy who's gotten a team to the playoffs before. I don't know that can really happen with Davis Mills. I mean, there's not a lot to work with there in terms of his skill set or in terms of his past performance that you would say, yeah, this guy's more than a backup. A Truckin', what did you think of the Alec Lewis report from on JJ yesterday about eliminating his middle of the field passing? I will be going on the Alec Lewis show tomorrow, so keep your eyes out for that. I think that went along with the dumbing down. I mean, when you look at the actual numbers, they didn't totally stop in the last few games throwing to the middle of the field. But it was very clear that one of the biggest frustrations from Kevin O'Connell and everybody else was the timing on throws over the middle. That so much of this offense is based on, all right, Jalen Naylor's running a clear out route deep, and Justin Jefferson is going to break across the middle underneath that route. So that route takes the safety with them deep. And if the safety doesn't go, then you throw it up over the top to Jalen Naylor. Like, this is how so much of this works. Like that dagger concept that we talk about so much, because it works all the time with Justin Jefferson, and they just couldn't hit it. McCarthy just could not hit it on time. And I think that they kind of got rid of it toward the end of the year where they just weren't even using it. Now, there were some throws that I remember that were over the middle. And I mean, I don't know how the NFL, like, is that just between the hashes, or I think with PFF, maybe it's just between the hashes. They did still complete some passes in those final games into the center of the field. But the main concepts that they used, that they were struggling with the timing, that it felt like they changed it. But it just, to me, it just spoke to the idea of, like, we didn't know the details exactly of how they, dumbed it down. We could kind of figure it out. They ran more, they played bigger personnel, they ran a lot of play action, and they tried to roll them out a little bit more. They tried to throw a lot of stuff that was just breaking out to the edges, and a lot of stuff to the intermediate area where he could just sort of wind up and throw as hard as he possibly can. That's always the concerning part about McCarthy, is that by the end of the year, you would think and you would hope, if that a quarterback is developing in the right way, that you're adding to his plate, not taking away. And there are, still some, and I understand why, that are kind of hanging on to the idea like that, hey, maybe it'll click, and maybe they don't want another starter, and maybe it'll be that list. Maybe it'll be Mariota. And it could be, but if we're just talking about odds, when that's what you had to do with your offense, when you had to take your offense and truncate it for a guy who's playing, throughout starting his career here more and more, usually you want to add more, not subtract by the end of the season. That is a big red flag. And talking about, not really being able to put in those main concepts that go over the middle of the field that KOC has had so much success with, again, just doesn't scream, oh yeah, they feel really great about this situation. Denny, keep trying to tell myself I'm only 39, makes 40 not seem like a big deal. Well, I'm right there with you, my friend. Right there with you. But I guess when I was 20, I would have thought that by 40, my skin would just be peeling off of the bones from old age right now. It's not. I can still run around the block. Still feel pretty good. Still play pickup ball. Still play golf. So we're good. That's all you need, right? None of us were making the pros anyway. Jets could be the worst team in the league. Wouldn't be surprised by that. The writing is on the wall with JJ. There's Sean Salisbury. That's good. Sean Salisbury's a free agent. Well, that's my point about McCarthy, is that it's not a bad idea for them to continue down the path of setting up with a situation where he has a chance to win the job with any of those quarterbacks on my list. Theoretically, it's not a bad idea. Then you're not completely punting yet, and you're not giving up after 10 games. But where is any evidence that that's what they're going to do? When they had to change the offense that much, when they've talked about him the way they've talked about him, there's nothing that you can look at and say, you could say, oh, well, the final 4 games, but nobody even, Kevin O'Connell or the other players, like, nobody even really brought that up. I mean, O'Connell sometimes said, yeah, he made some progress, but it wasn't like, this is the real McCarthy. Like, there was just nothing there and we'll see, maybe that will be different at the combine. Maybe he'll go to the combine and say, Maybe he was just frustrated at the end of the season, and that's why he didn't have that tune. We're going to find out. I doubt they're going to spill the beans exactly what they're going to do. Although last year they did give us a very strong indication of which direction they were going. So I'm interested in that. The combine coverage, by the way, Purple Insider will be there for 3 days and have all sorts of guests coming on. And Dane Mizutani and I will break down when Kevin O'Connell talks, if Rob Brzezinski talks as well. We're going to have a full podcast on that. Chris Trapasso also coming along, the official draft analyst of Purple Insider, formerly of CBS Sports. So he's going to be there doing at least 2, maybe 3 shows, breaking down everything, all the rumors. It's going to be fun. So make sure you tune in then. Mr. Mayor, if Malik Willis goes to the Dolphins, I'll be really disappointed to watch his career die. It's a tough sell that can work out. That's why Malik is, I think, in play for the Minnesota Vikings. I would not count that out just because there are some other teams that have a starting position to guarantee him. The Vikings have a situation that they can mostly guarantee that he's going to have his best chance to succeed. Arizona makes a lot of sense for Malik too. But Cleveland, the Jets, Miami, oh no. You are just asking to flame out of the NFL and take the short-term amount of money. I mean, even if you think about, even if you think about like Justin Fields going to the Jets, Justin Fields was okay with Pittsburgh and just horrific with the Jets. Nasaj, Warren Sharp's analysis matches Coller and Alec on the dumbing down. JJ was awful. It's okay to say doesn't mean he's done. Oh, there's no question about any of that. I mean, when Aaron Jones said it in response to a question about simplifying it. But even if you're talking about simplifying it, people were happy about that. Like, oh yeah, it was too complicated. And my thought was, what? This offense just last year produced the 6th highest amount of total EPA passing and a all-pro caliber season for Justin Jefferson and 14 wins. This offense that we're talking about, and you want to lop off a part of it? I don't think so. I need the quarterback to run it, was my view. You have to have the quarterback able to run your system for your coach. And it was actually very interesting. I was watching a little bit of Eli Manning sitting down with John Gruden, and Eli Manning talked about when Ben McAdoo came to the Giants that he had him use different footwork than he had ever used before. Now think about how kind of crazy that is. But Eli Manning said, look, man, I mean, you play to what your coach's system is. All these details have a reason, and it's your job to learn them and get them right. Like, there's no excuses. If that's the coach in his system and that's how you're supposed to do it, then you do it. I think from the outside, we always want it to be the coach's fault. We want it to be the system's fault when someone doesn't play well, because that leaves the door open to like, maybe there's a different answer that is right there if they just need to find it. But if you can't even get people lined up, get the snap count off, run the motions you're supposed to run, throw to the places you're supposed to throw on time, it's just really hard to make an argument that it's going to work out, or at least work out anytime soon. And the official Purple Insider stance has been that JJ McCarthy can someday be a very good quarterback. But everything we saw is it doesn't feel that close right now to that. And what they do at quarterback is going to tell us how close they think it is. Because if they get Mariota, it'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess that means they do think that it would be okay if McCarthy was the starter. If they get Kyler Murray, then they do not think it's okay if he's the starter. It's what they do there is going to tell us everything. It's kind of like Godfather. I've been watching all these clips of Godfather after Robert Duvall passed away. And in The Godfather, late in the movie, so spoiler here, Al Pacino, Marlon Brando are having this conversation in a garden. And Marlon Brando says, whoever comes to you with the meeting, they're the one that's turning on you. And then it ends up being Sally who's turning on him. And, he gets whacked because it's Godfather. But in this case, here's the connection. It's sort of the same thing. It's whoever, well, no one's getting whacked, but maybe JJ. Anyway, it's whatever they do will tell us. That's really the point. It's like whatever happens next will give you the answer for who it is that would turn on you in The Godfather. In this case, it's whoever it is that comes here to play quarterback in that room alongside JJ McCarthy will tell us everything that we need to know about how the Vikings feel about JJ McCarthy. If they get Jimmy Garoppolo, then they're still in on McCarthy. If they get Derek Carr, they are not. Then they are at least out for now. And maybe there's a development possibility. And then there's a few guys that would not make it as clear. Geno Smith, Kirk. I mean, I guess if they got Aaron Rodgers, you could sell, hey, he's going to sit behind Rodgers for a year. So those guys would make it a little less clear. Denny, you asked AI about what the best quarterback competition was and said Kirk with Mac Jones is the dark horse. Well, all of that is just plagiarized from people like myself and Alec and whatever. So they're going to come up with similar answers to us. Nasaj says, I don't know how anybody whose job depending on winning football games can say play JJ with no other real option. I think that's totally fair. Totally fair. KFT, JJ threw over the middle in college. It does not matter, man. It does not matter. Whatever happened in college is gone. Nothing matters. He won a national championship. Congratulations. He threw over the middle. Congratulations. Those things did not happen in the NFL. It does not matter what he did in college. It truly does not. That is gone. And do I think that he could learn to do that with a lot more reps? Yes. Do I think he can learn to do it this spring? No, I do not think you can learn to do it that in a couple of months of practicing behind the scenes or throwing routes on air with Justin Jefferson. I really don't. I think it takes a lot longer than that. And I think if we were trying to put a number on how many passes until you really got consistency with footwork and accuracy and touch, I'd probably say like 800 or 900, which you can't get to this year. I mean, best case scenario for JJ McCarthy might be them getting somebody else and having him sit for a year and learn how to play quarterback, because throwing him in on the fly, it just did not work. Not a Twerk says, did you see the Lee Hunter comp of Pat Williams? Oh, come on. Come on. Is he really that big? Pat Williams was huge. I don't know. I mean, Lee Hunter has been a prospect that I've got my eyes on, but Pat Williams was a mountain of a human being. I don't know if you're quite getting that kind of size. I guess I could look up what his height and weight. Well, we'll see. I guess the combine, what his height and weight really is, because last year they were listing Mason Graham at like 315 at the combine. He's like 290 or 285. So there's a lot of differences there. They tend to pump that stuff up. Vikings TW, even if JJ takes a back seat, I would keep developing him. I agree with that. Unless you're done, unless you're really just not into the guy at all. And then you're like, okay, we got to just move on. And then you trade him for something. If you're totally out, if you're Josh Rosen levels of out, if you're not, then even if it's Kyler, even if it's Derek Carr, okay, keep developing behind the scenes and see what happens. Because Jordan Love, if we had seen Jordan Love play early on, I think it would have looked like JJ McCarthy. We just didn't see it because Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy, but I think it probably would have looked like that. And then eventually he becomes pretty good. I think there's a similarity there with those two guys. Denny says, never seen a coach pivot on a quarterback so much so quickly. Not looking good for my desire for JJ to start. There was a pivot from the way that O'Connell talked about him. Even from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, it changed as we went along. But I mean, early on, O'Connell, I think, was very hesitant to answer a lot of questions about JJ in 2024 camp, other than to just say, like, every day is progress and that's what we're trying to do with him and so forth. He seemed to kind of want to protect him a little bit from, hey, is he going to be your starter? Is there a quarterback competition? And that kind of thing. And then it seemed legitimately excited about a lot of the things that he did in training camp, as all of us were from watching those camp practices. And then as it started to fall off the side of the earth in the middle of the season, that's where you kind of got that sense that like O'Connell understands now maybe better than ever that this is why organizations fail quarterbacks sometimes, because it's not a situation where everybody can get equal and proper time to develop. If it was, you'd probably end up with better quarterback play, but it's just not. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And KFT, I don't think anyone's saying it's a good idea to just give up entirely. It's just, how does it actually get there? The one way that it actually could get there would be if you had Aaron Rodgers for a year or Derek Carr for a year, and then they got you back to the playoffs, kind of stabilize the franchise, and then you feel great about what you've seen behind the scenes, and you go out and get competition for him the following year, and then he wins it and goes back to being your quarterback. That's still possible. I think it becomes a long shot. If he's not starting week 1, then it's a long shot he ever starts again, save for injury, but it's also not totally unprecedented or impossible. I think all of you are on the right page of, like, there's no reason to just give up. It's just, how do you make this happen? Like, logistically, how do you make this happen with the scenario with the locker room? Because if you just went back to McCarthy with no backup plan and said, oh, we're going to ride or die with him, I mean, you're losing the locker room. You could tell from the Radio Row comments. I mean, not because of JJ as a person. I want to be clear about that. I think everything I heard from players in the locker room was that JJ as a guy, it was not a problem. It was, you moved on from the quarterback who won the Super Bowl. Sam Darnold is succeeding. Why did we move on from him? And if you don't go out and get a real backup quarterback, or I should say a real competition for him, or a real starter who's been a starter in the league before, I think then there's going to be a lot of questions of, wait, are these guys just wasting my prime? Truckin, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Justin Fields is one of the quarterbacks. I mean, are you mean that you are at least intrigued in, or are least intrigued with for the Vikings? I'm having trouble reading the tone there. I don't have any intrigue with Justin Fields because he can't throw it on time. And you already have a quarterback who can't do that. Truckin, Malik Willis would beat out JJ. Oh yeah. I mean, if you get Malik Willis, he's your quarterback. Yep. That's not a competition. Consigliere corner with Matthew Coller. That is one thing that I can definitely go in depth on is Goodfellas, Godfather movies. I've watched every episode of The Sopranos, I think 3 times. I had one of my good friends in college, and right after college, we just would get together and watch gangster movies. I mean, you know, so these days don't have as much time for it, but it's with, you know, all the Godfather clips now popping up. It's been great to relive some of that stuff and how great those movies really were. Do you like Tyler Huntley? Nah, I don't. He's fine. I don't, you know, Gardner Minshew, these guys are backups. Like, that's the difference between competition versus just backup. Pure, unadulterated backing upping. Like, those aren't competition at all if you're bringing those guys. Andrew, odds we will know the quarterback situation day 1 of free agency. Last year it was unknown until Sam Howell acquisition. Surely we should know earlier this year. This is much more like 2024, where they moved on from Kirk, or he moved on the first day of free agency. I think it'll go kind of that way. If it drags out past the first couple days of free agency, it's going to be really confusing. I mean, you can work out a trade with Arizona whenever. You can't make it official until the start of the league year, but you can work it out. The trade that went down with Goff and Stafford, I think it was reported in January and was not finalized until the league year started. So, I mean, that could happen anytime. I'm always around for an emergency pod if it's necessary. So that could get worked out behind the scenes and leak out whenever, if you're doing one of those trades. But if you're talking about signing someone or when they could cut Kyler, that would be free agency. That would be when free agency actually starts. And I mean, who knows? Because you actually have to get to free agency, not the tampering period. The tampering period is where we get all the news. the legal tampering. But then I think with actually cutting him, it's the third day. I think details wise, I'll have to check on this, but I think it's the third day of the league year where a bunch of guarantees kick in for Kyler Murray. So they'd have to do it before that. So once you get to the first day of the league year, if he's not traded, then he is going to be released, I would suspect. I very much doubt that they're going to just keep him around after all this. So if they release him, then you can pick him up from there and he's just a free agent. But you could do something else before then. Like Kirk could sign here on the first day because I think he has to be released too. Oh no, I guess that's right. It wouldn't be the legal tampering. It would be the first. Yeah, I think those guys would probably get released on the first day of the new league year. So yeah, March is where we'll probably get our answer unless there is a trade. Nasaj, wonder if the best option is to have JJ sit behind someone for a year. Long-term, maybe the best and most patient thing to do. That really depends on how close they think it is. Because if they think, hey, all he needs is just this and this, and if we can just spend all this time behind the scenes working on it while Aaron Rodgers plays quarterback for us, okay. But if they think that he's just not going to make it, like he doesn't really fit in the NFL and they missed something in the evaluation and it doesn't look anything like we believe an NFL starting quarterback that wins a lot of games is going to look, then it might not make any difference. But if you're going to take like a Hail Mary at this thing turning around and actually working, that probably is the best way for him to be a backup and just totally commit to that job, because so many quarterbacks over the years have made that actually work. I believe Minshew did not tear his ACL. I think he got a knee injury, but I don't know if he tore his ACL. I don't think he's out, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's not a guy who's in my discussion at all. Corey, unless they secretly love McCarthy and just need a regular backup for him, in which case then he is. Corey says, I don't think that they're waiting until the end of training camp to get it figured out. Yeah, that's for sure. It should be early. It very much should be early in free agency. We'll just call you some dude. KOC tried to call plays like Don Coryell. It's fool's gold unless you have Dan Fouts and not JJ. Or the other two quarterbacks that they won a ton of games with. I just think that people like to really latch on to stuff and don't think too much about it. I mean, throwing downfield and creating explosive plays to pass the game is the way to win. And they did it successfully with Sam Darnold, who's not Dan Fouts. In terms of, well, I guess he does have a Dan Fouts caliber arm and he does have a Super Bowl ring, so I shouldn't say that, but Dan Fouts is one of the best quarterbacks in history. And those offenses were crazy back in the early 80s with Dan Fouts and Wes Chandler and John Jefferson and so forth, and super fun with the San Diego Superchargers. But even with Kirk Cousins, he went 17-8 as a starting quarterback of this team. And they succeeded in 2023 with Kirk not pushing the ball that far down the field. I mean, a lot of it in this offense has to do with the quarterback's own decision-making. This idea that, I mean, when you wanted him to throw short passes, you go look at JJ McCarthy's short pass data. It's horrific. Actually, where is he better? Down the field. He was better throwing down the field by a country mile than he was throwing short. That seemed to be everybody's solution to me, which was kind of odd. Like, why aren't you just doing quick game all the time? He's terrible at quick game. He's the worst at quick game I think I've ever seen in the numbers from somebody that started for that long. The thing that he was doing pretty well was pushing the intermediate passes and then to some extent down the field at times. He'd made a lot of mistakes down the field too. But thinking that he just had this completely cockamamie offense that is so crazy to be running. It's just a weird take when we just saw it work super well with Sam Darnold the year before. You have to, and regardless, look, he's the coach this year. So whoever's playing quarterback for him has to be able to run his offense. And if McCarthy gets somebody else, then they can try something else. Trucking Tanner McKee in the last stream was kind of intriguing, but another unknown. Yeah, Tanner McKee, actually, you know what? I always forget one, right? I always forget one. Tanner McKee probably should have been on the list. And it's funny because I just talked to Mike Renner the other day. I don't know what to make of Tanner McKee. Mike has always loved him and thinks that he's got a chance, loved him as a prospect, and thinks that he's got a chance to be a starter. I haven't even really considered Tanner McKee as part of the conversation. I think that he's going to be somebody's backup quarterback. So I wasn't even thinking of him as part of a QB competition. I know Mike really likes him, and I'm kind of intrigued because of that. I just haven't gotten there of, yeah, like that's a guy who you could really see being the Viking starter because we have no sample on him whatsoever. So he would be the guy. Last time I kind of left Geno Smith off. I guess I could put him instead. I threw Zach Wilson on there because he started before. I mean, Tanner McKee has basically just not even played. That one's much harder. Lee Hunter at 18 is a reach. 6'4", 350. How big was Pat Williams? Or 325, you said. How big was Pat Williams? Pat Williams had to have been 370. There's a lot of man there. Lot of man. Trucking, I think Anthony Richardson will be a disaster. Probably. Usually when quarterbacks go that way, that's how it is. Yes, there was a report about Arizona wanting Tyson Bagent. I don't know. For what? I mean, he could start some games, but for what? That does not seem like a real option. Let me remind you all of the FanDuel question of the day, which was Ty Simpson on FanDuel is 10,000 to 1 to go number 1 overall. Now, wouldn't that be a twist from the Raiders? I guess we would never be surprised by anything the Raiders would do. But I don't think they're going to do that. However, I am interested to know if you all are interested in Ty Simpson, were he to drop into the 3rd round, for example. Like, would you spend a pick there, or do you feel like that would be kind of a waste of a draft pick? So anyway, well, good discussion, everybody. I feel like we had a good conversation, moving a little bit away from the quarterbacks at first and then swooping back into the quarterbacks as we have the combine coming up next week. So starting to really get into this draft, and I'm going to make lists. Now, of course, the combine coverage is going to be, a lot of stuff that's just going down there in Indy, a lot of different guests that I'm going to have on the show talking about intriguing players for the draft, all of the buzz that goes on in the evenings after everybody's done on Radio Row and so forth, and what Kevin O'Connell has to say. But it's something I want to continue to do throughout the offseason, make lists of different stuff. Free agency will be coming up, best fits, things like that. So I appreciate all of the interactions and reactions and such. So I hope you guys had a good time, and we'll see, if anything pops up through the next couple days. Of course, I'm very happy to go live. Might even do it again tomorrow if I've got something interesting. I haven't really decided. I'm kind of playing it by ear a little bit at this time of year. So I guess we shall see. But thanks again, everybody, for popping in, and we'll talk to y'all later.